What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Today we're here with Reverend Lennox Yearwood, but you know how I am. I'm calling him Rev the whole time. That's my favorite thing to say is Rev, of course. He's, affiliated with the Hip Hop Caucus, and we're going to have a conversation with him today about the Hip Hop Caucus and different things they're pushing. So, Rev, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
All right. So, Rev, tell people a little bit, that because they never heard about the Hip Hop Caucus. Inform us about that and what is the initiative and push?
Yeah, Hip Hop Caucus started, it'll be 16 years ago, this year, actually, and back in 2004. When it first got started, I was working with a number of, music moguls, P. Diddy, Jay-Z, and others to get out the vote. I was actually the grassroots coordinator for the Hip Hop Summit Action Network, which was one of the organizations, and I was the co-architect with the Vote or Die campaign, which was actually part of Citizen Change, which is Diddy's organization, and then helped worked on Voice Your Choice. And so in 2004, we were working on all these get up the vote efforts, and one of the key ones people know is probably Vote or Die. After that election, we saw the power of the culture. We saw we use one's cultural expression, we could shape one's political experience. And so we began to get more engaged in the process in that regard. So that was the beginning of it. And then from there, I am originally from Louisiana. And so the next year after we got started, 2004, I was made the president in 2004. And then in 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit. And when Hurricane Katrina hit, I literally was watching my home folks throughout the Gulf Coast, throughout from Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama, literally just devastated by Hurricane Katrina and also Rita, which was literally about a month later. And in my new position, God works in mysterious ways. I was like, well, I'm in this position now as the president. Let's use that to engage, to help people. And we created something called the Gulf Coast Renewal Campaign to help people just get back home and fight against many issues that they were dealing with. And actually that won an award, one of the first awards for the Hip Hop Caucus. And we won an award in that aspect. So that's Hip Hop Caucus. And we've been doing work, particularly around issues of democracy. We still get out the vote. We still do issues now around environmental justice. So we still work around things from Katrina. We actually will be having our 15th commemoration for Katrina coming up on August 29th. People can go to katrina15.com and check that out. We still work on issues regarding police brutality and other issues. And so we're just really excited to use our platform just to make a change.
All right, Rev. So, I got a line of questions for you because I'm going to have to question you no different than my audience would expect me to ask questions for you. So you're saying that your purpose is just, of your organization is to get into the Black communities and say, hey, we need to, register and just get out the vote. Is that just kind of what you focus on?
It's interesting. Hip hop is a unique culture. So it's not just Black. I mean, it's funny. The bulk of our organization is people of color, mostly Black and Indigenous and people of color in the Hip Hop Caucus. But the culture is not just Black. People who are in hip hop are white, Black, brown, red, yellow, male, female, theists like me or atheists. We have a lot of people from all different walks of life who respond to the culture. So I guess the idea is that we want everybody to vote. No matter if you're Republican or you're Democrat or you're independent, we want you to vote and make sure your voice is heard. We actually feel that makes the democracy much stronger. Now you gotta understand, for me, before I was at the Hip Hop Caucus, I was also in the Air Force. I was also an officer in the Air Force, and so it's very important for me to also just kind of be like, democracy is very important for my background. And it doesn't matter, when I signed up back then, it wasn't signing up for one certain set of people. It was for this idea of democracy and this idea that no matter what democracy brings, is better for all people.
Okay, but over here, I'm going to tell you how we roll with a lot of with the bulk of who my audience are Black Americans, also those who are throughout Africa and in the Caribbean. So I'm gonna use that because our concerns are you really not met. I mean, I get other people's part of hip hop. I get it. I know about it just as much as anybody else. But the concerns that I'm going to focus on is the concerns of Black America with you. So why do you feel that Black America needs to get out to vote? What would be the reason we need to do that?
There's a lot of different reasons. One, historically, I think that we have been prohibited from voting and weren't allowed to vote. And so that's one of the main issues. This from a historical aspect of just that our parents, as we've heard many times, our parents literally died for us and did everything they could so that we could make sure our voice was heard in the political process. I think second, the issue of policy. I think that we've learned one thing we say at Hip Hop Caucus, that either you shape policy or policy shapes you. So in regards to legislation, if you really want change in your community, it really usually flows through legislation and policy. And so the only way to really do that is having people who either represent you or understands you or respects you. And that's the thing about it. And so for Black Americans, it's critical for people to have people represent them, to understand them, or to respect them, and to put forward policies that can help them in all aspects. So help them from education or housing or wealth, immigration. I think that that's very important. And then lastly, I think that it's important to be engaged, because I think that there's a sense of just when you are engaged, you have ownership. You have a mentality of ownership. When you don't feel you're a part of something, you kind of step back and let others decide for you what is or what should be done. But I think that in this process, when we want people to vote and get out there and be engaged, it isn't up to election day. We actually want people to be engaged past election day and onwards. Actually, one of our problems with some politicians is that they only come around election day and then we don't see them again. But we don't want that. We want people to be engaged up to election day and past election. No matter who wins, you still have to be engaged and push that person to hear your point of view and what your arguments can be.
All right. So you mentioned a few things. I want to go through that. So you mentioned historic, and I understand historic, ramifications of that. And I know our brothers and sisters fought very hard. Our ancestors fought very hard just to live, and that was just part of it, voting. But you mentioned policy. What policies that you know of specific for Black Americans that we need to get up and go, leave our homes and go vote for? What policy and what politician is giving us policies specific on direct affect Black America?
Well, it's a lot. I mean, so let's just break it down on that. So first of all, when you're voting for your federal, your state, and your local governments. And so from the local governments, usually those things impact you, obviously locally, but it'll impact you from everything from your trash collection to how the buses run, where new schools are built, where that new hospital can go, if it's a stop sign on your road or not, what's happening. And so locally, it's very important to be engaged. That actually is a lot of times when we're talking about issues regarding sometimes police brutality or education or housing or healthcare. A lot of issues are discussed on the local level. Your mayor, your city council, it could be whoever it may be. The next level up is then your state. State is kind of in the in-between process. And so your state process is again, it's linked into you locally, because obviously it's in your state, but also there's some federal links to that as well. And that can also go into your education, your healthcare, but then it can go into your highways, it can go to transportation, it can go into literally, people with unemployment, and many other issues that go along with that. And then federal, obviously is a national, and those are the national laws that impact you, from everything from voting to you name it. It could be housing, healthcare, immigration. And so all of these things impact your life. I mean, literally impact your life. If you're going to buy a new home in your community, the policies that are impacted on the local, state, and federal level impact literally not only the kind of home you can buy, but what kind of loan you can get. I mean, different kind of loans you can get. There are conventional loans, there are federal loans, there are VA loans. So literally, if you can even what you can afford, so literally your living, your shelter can be impacted by the policies around you. And this goes up the line. I mean, there's clearly everything you do, from the water you drink to the air you breathe, everything is connected to policy.
Rev, not to, okay. I don't want to cut you off, but I want to hit on something. I understand. Basically, you kind of talk about the purpose of voting. I understand that. I think most of our audience get the purpose of voting. But what I'm asking you is, what policies, specific policies, you can name whatever candidate that says that they're going to direct something. For instance, I'm looking at a new study that was sent to me by LendingTree.com. And in this study, they're talking about the wealth gap, okay, that's happening to Black Americans. Now, according to LendingTree.com, it said in 2016, they said that Black families' median net worth was only $17,600, while whites was $171,000. Okay, the median net worth. Okay, so what policies is going to address that? See, this is a dire position that we're in. We can't just say we need to get up and vote because our ancestors died. Listen.
No,
right now, they're not trying to even hear that. I'm just being real with you. They're trying to say, listen, we dying out here. And then you had mentioned, I'll get to that later. But what policies is going to address that? That's what I'm saying. Reparations. We got to have reparations, Rev. So I'm saying, what policies is going to, or politicians you know of that got a policy to say, this is y'all register to vote, get out there and vote, because these are the people that's going to help with this wealth gap problem.
Yeah, so the way policy works, though, is that there are specific policies that we can put in place. In other words, to your point, reparations, I'm for reparations. So that can have a substantial impact to what we need to get. But let me just go back to your point about policy and why it's not this roundabout, because one of the things about policy is this. Policy is a delayed response to how policies are enacted. In other words, one of the problems that we have is that the policy that were put forth in the 80s and the 90s are the same things that have an impact on us now, 20 years into the 21st century. And so what wasn't done, or what was done back then, is having an impact on the wealth gap you're talking about right now. So if you're talking about money's being put towards policy, I went to a Black college. I went to a lot of Black colleges where I went to. Mm-hmm. So I'm for money going to Black college. I'm all for that. That's one of my big things, because I love HBCUs. But in that, I can push for policies right now, specifically a bill on the federal level, and in some cases state level, depending where HBCUs are, if it's Texas Southern, and Texas, or it's Grambling and over there in Shreveport, whatever. But I can push for a policy that can say, listen, give these HBCUs right now this much money. I want you to give them enough money so that students can go there for free. That's a policy. We can enact that. And that can have a huge impact on the HBCU and folks going there. But
Rev, I have to say something, brother. The majority of Black people don't even go to HBCUs, to be honest with you. And right now, when we look, especially right now with coronavirus, right? We're looking at a lot of people lost jobs. HBCUs getting money is not really going to help the majority of Black America.
You asked about a specific policy that I would advocate for.
Not you, Rev. Not you. The question I keep asking you is, who is it that we should go out and vote for that's going to address the specific policies that we need, like the wealth gap, like, locking people up when they shouldn't be locking people up, reparations. I'm just saying, because people are asking this question to people like me or many others to say, well, why should we get out there and vote? And I want to give them the right information to say, hey, you should do this because of this. So that's why I'm asking you that question, since you're more involved in voter registration, etc.
Yeah, and I guess to answer your question, so it's not that people of color are a monolith, or it's not that.
You mean Black Americans?
Yes.
Okay, because the reason why I keep saying that, because at least for us, it's very offensive to hear people of color. We are Black America, African Americans. You got Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans. Like, I don't like that term. So okay, Black Americans. There you go.
I definitely understand that, but let me just say, this, because this is important. I think you're right. And what policies can get you motivated? If I can just use this, if I can take an analogy to your point, when I go to the store, for instance, when I'm hungry, I don't go for one item in that store. I don't go to my local supermarket and says, man, what's going to get me to go to the store is that I really want some bananas, or I really want this one thing. Normally when you go to the store, when you're hungry, you go to the store with the idea that this is all what I'm going to get to prepare and store and have these meals. Policy is very similar to that. It's not that different. And so while one thing can get you excited, you should be much more diverse than having this one policy lens, because as a human, we are not just this one thing. So for instance, I have children, and so I am concerned about my children's education, as are other Black Americans. They should be concerned about education. Black Americans should be concerned about housing. That's critical. Black Americans should be concerned about the environment, if they have clean air or clean water. Black Americans should be concerned about how our military is used or not used. Black Americans must be concerned about issues regarding healthcare. And so that's what I mean when I said that there's not just one policy. That if you're asking what's the one policy that's gonna get Black Americans to be like, that's it. That's that one policy. We got it. We're gonna go on that one policy. That's like me saying, I'm going to the store, I'm gonna get them bananas. That's all I'm gonna need forever. That's not kind of how policy works. So I just think that I agree with you. Now, there are some things that are on the front burner. So right now, the issue of police brutality is an example, and criminal justice is something that we want to be dealt with. But that, again, I go in the country and I see Black Americans all over this country. And so for certain Black Americans, criminal justice may not be on their front burner. That may not be what they're looking for. Some Black Americans are looking for economic empowerment. They're looking for jobs. They're looking for things in that aspect, or to be entrepreneurs. And so I guess that's what I'm just trying to say, that from a policy standpoint, it's important for us to be engaged in the entire process, not just by a piecemeal to get excited. Because then if, for instance, we don't win on that one policy measure, then you won't think that politics works for you. And it does.
Okay, so looking at our condition, let's just talk about our condition as a people. We looking at the studies saying our median net worth in homes. We've been having politicians in our community for a long time, and yet we're still in a position that's worse off in a lot of times than other groups. So I'm just telling you what the people are telling me. They're saying, Phil, it's not working because we're not getting policy specific for us. And you mentioned the banana situation. Let me tell you how I do with a store. If a store do not have all of what I need, I don't go to that particular store. I go to a store that has everything that I need, the one thing I'm looking for, and everything else. And that's what most people do. So what's been happening to Black Americans, and what a lot of people have been telling me, is that we are tired of saying, well, just get out there and carry the water for everybody else. Oh, we got to care about this, care about that. But then at the end of the day, we look at everyone else getting their needs met except Black America. Show me the George Floyds that's happening in every community constantly. The Breonna Taylors constantly. You get what I'm saying? Like the ending of qualified immunity needs to happen. It just won't.
But this is what I mean. I think so. Your point is correct. One, I agree. If you go to the store and it doesn't have what you want, you should demand that they either have what you want or you go someplace else. So I'm with you on that.
Right.
I also agree with you that I think that we shouldn't confuse legislation with the legislator. And I think that we should hold, because unless it's a dictatorship, let's say that forever. I think a lot of times we have people who are in office who is obviously not doing their job. And then we allow them to come back and continue to not do their job. Mm-hmm. I think that
I agree.
This is the reason why we have to hold politicians accountable and measurable. So they'd be like, and see what they said they would do. Say you were voting for me and say, okay, Rev, I want you to run for down there in Texas and I want you to be our guy. And I said, okay, what I'm gonna do is this. I'm gonna make sure that everybody gets a new roof in our community, right? I'm gonna make sure everybody gets a new roof. That's my legislation. I'm gonna make sure I'm running on that campaign. So that's great, Rev. We put you on that. Get a new roof. 2 years later, nobody got a roof. But y'all like Rev. Y'all like me because I'm this nice guy. I said, man, we like you, Rev. You know, you come by, talk to the babies. You know, you're a nice guy. And he put back in office again. That's the problem. I can be a nice guy. I can be wonderful. I can be the buddy. But you can't allow for me to not do what I say I'm going to do. So you're right. What you're saying is that holding the politicians accountable according to their platform, that's your contract. Whenever you have that person either on the federal level, which is to your point, if you're voting for the president now, you can look at Donald Trump, you can look at Joe Biden and say, okay, this is what they are saying they're going to do. And if they don't do that, or they come around and something happens in between that, you have to hold them accountable. Or if it's clear they can't do what they need to do to protect you, then you gotta be like, no, this guy ain't really for me. I gotta get somebody else. Or on the local and state level, it's the exact same situation. So we have to take the promises of politicians much more seriously and look at that and put that on the kitchen door and check it off to go through. Not just wait for them, not just assume they're gonna do it. Well, I hired them, they're gonna get it done. That goes back to your point about the bananas. If you tell the store and you say, hey, I want some bananas, and you come back a month later and there's still no bananas, but you keep coming back, ain't nothing wrong with the store, it's something wrong with you. And so at some point in time, you gotta be like, listen, I'm asking for something that's gonna make my family and my life better. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I want all those things. And so I need you to make sure if you're politicking, put those things in place. And I agree with you. We have a job to ensure, which is what we do, is to ensure that people understand how important that contract is. Not just voting for somebody because they're a celebrity or you like them or they go to your church or they go to your mosque or whatever the case may be. You know, you went to school with them. No. But what is it that they're putting forth that they are going to do? What they can do. And then they should come back and tell you, if we didn't do it, why couldn't you do it? These were the roadblocks.
Right. Because with the presidency of Barack Obama, we learned that when we don't demand certain policies to be put forth and we just assume that, oh, well, he's going to do this because he knows, then that's when we get certain things we didn't get during that presidency of Barack Obama. So now we're saying you got to have a policy now. It needs to be tangible things that we need in the Black community, because when I see other groups, they're always addressing other groups and saying what they're going to do for them, do for this, do for that. And that's what I'm saying is the people are saying, and what they're constantly telling me, Rev, is listen, I'm not leaving my house unless they have policies that's going to benefit Black America. And that's going to I can't say nothing more than that, Rev. You know, I know the importance of voting. I know all that you told me. I'm with you 100%. Local politicians and all of that. What I'm saying is our people feel so apathetic, you know, and like say, in order to get them going, they got to have policies. I'm not saying it's you, because you not have nothing to do with that. You're not even a politician. I'm just saying that people, that's how they feel, and that's what they're looking at. You look at Breonna Taylor, you know, that situation, the cops haven't been arrested. You have certain politicians that haven't even addressed it. You know what I'm saying?
No, and I agree. So let's go back to Barack Obama, right? So I mentioned to you about Port Arthur, Texas. One thing about Port Arthur, Texas, what I know about is that it has very high level of pollution. And one of the things I mentioned before, I'm from Louisiana, and being from Louisiana, they call Louisiana Cancer Alley. Mm-hmm. And people in Louisiana are fighting with emphysema and cancer and bronchitis because of the pollution that is spewed into their communities. Particularly 68% of Black Americans live within 30 miles of a coal-fired power plant. And so that literally, that pollution, they are creating communities that people label as sacrifice zones or vulnerable communities. I bring that up for this reason. When those pipelines that actually cause these chemicals to be spewed, whatever that chemical may be, it may be a landfill, maybe oil, maybe dirt, it may be whatever it is, but it's put right into our communities of Black Americans a lot of times. I went, and with many others, and one of the pipelines that would end up in actually Port Arthur, Texas, we went to protest that. We went when Barack Obama was there, and I was arrested at the White House with Barack Obama. I mean, technically, he's the one who arrested me. So, I mean, and there are many people who say, oh, you can't do that. My goodness, how are you going to get arrested for Barack Obama? That's terrible. You know, he's a Black president and you up there get arrested. I said, I don't care, because the contract of my job is to be there for my community who's suffering because of things that are being done to them. And so my job is not to be look at you as a Democrat or Republican. My job as an activist is to then say that's outrageous, because I know if you don't make a stand for this, we gotta make a stand. And so I bring that up because that's important. And I think more of us need to have that mentality to be willing to kind of put themselves on the line for our communities. And we want especially our politicians, not to be worried about who else, to serve the people and not those who have the profits. And I think that's what you're saying here. And so I agree with you. I'm not just saying, I agree, 100% agree with you. But I do think that it isn't so, if we give away that power though, I don't agree with the standpoint that we should stay home. That is our power. I'm not going to give you my power. We got to figure out a way to hold you accountable and do that better and put people in office who are really from our communities. That needs to happen. But I'm not going to put my hands up and say, oh, I just give up. You know, we can't do it. Then I'm giving you the keys to my destiny. And we can't do that. Like that cannot, if anybody's thinking that, do not think that way. You have to still control your own destiny or someone else will. So I'm hopeful that even though it can be discouraging, people cannot follow through on their promises. Politicians, you know, that's what they do. Particularly those who look like us sometimes, and they do that. You still have to fight for yourself and for your family.
Oh, Rev, I'm not telling nobody to vote, not to vote. That's not what media is supposed to do. We're supposed to just present the information. I'm just telling you what the people are saying, right? What the people are telling us is saying, hey, because politicians haven't done what they're supposed to do, right? And because a lot of politicians have failed them, because politicians don't even want to put up specific policies for Black America, some of them are saying, I'm not fooling with it. I'm washing my hands with the whole thing. And that's why I'm presenting that to you, since you are the guy that's telling people to, hey, register to vote, get out there. Now, I do believe voting can work in local instances. I believe that more than anything locally. You have a little bit more power over things locally, I would say. And your local politics affect you a lot more than even your federal politics. I do agree with that. But we just got to have people that's going to, you know, I can go down that route, but that's not your deal. But this is the thing. So if you want to talk to those people right now that say, I'm just not, forget it, I don't care nothing about it because I don't get what I need. I watch, you know, other people, you even mentioned immigration. And then, you know, Black Americans have told me, well, what immigration got to do with us? He said, it's our children that's getting put in the school to prison pipeline. What that got to do with us? You know, our, you know, people are having this big wealth gap. What does that got to do with us as a community? You understand what I'm saying? I mean, it helped me to talk to them, Rev. That's what I'm saying to you.
I will. So I am a Christian minister, right? That's my upbringing. That's my calling. I went to divinity school, seminary, all that good stuff.
Right.
That's my background. When I was in seminary, I had to study other religions. I had to study Buddhism, had to study Islam, I had to study different religions, not so much that I was going to be out there preaching that, but I had to know about it. And I do think that if our community is not aware from this is the policy, not a feel good, not an emotional, but from a policy standpoint, because policy is also tied to a budget. And the way policy works is at the end of the day, you got to come and then advocate for what you want. And then if you can advocate for it the most and prove that you need it the most, then you're going to get a portion of that budget to take care of what you want. You mentioned reparations. Reparations is money. Because you're transferring money from one to the other based upon the belief that there was a harm done and that harm is being made correct. And in correcting that, only way that can be done is that money needs to transfer from one to the next. If the budget comes from primarily taxes or wherever they come from, then if it's $10 million and you want that for reparations, then wherever that amount for that needs to go to that. But then whatever's left needs to go to other things. And then people begin to literally look at, okay, well, I want this for schools, I want this for healthcare, I want this for, and the budget gets chopped up. The budget is critical as far as in the policy making process, which we gotta teach our people this understanding of why this is important. So then when other issues come up, you can then say that ain't really my issue, like me, I ain't really my religion, I'm not from that faith, I'm not really from that background. But if you have to find commonplace, which is a part of also politics and part of policy when it comes to budgets, they can say, okay, but listen, that ain't my thing, but I understand this, and if we can maybe find some common ground, then maybe we can make some things happen. So you just got to know, you got to be astute. Now, again, normally you don't have to, like when you go to a doctor's office, you don't have to know everything about medicine. That's your doctor's job. But right now, what you're saying, which I agree with, if you have politicians who you don't trust, then you have to know more than you thought you would know. And I think that's your point. Your point is it's unfortunate that we have politicians who don't care, and they take advantage of you not knowing, and you become discouraged. And then so you have to not get discouraged. I really want to say that's so important. I think that your point you're making, I think that people get discouraged, and I understand it. Like I'm clear, super clear on how people just don't do. They get in there and they just eat them shrimps and meatballs on sticks, and they just do that stuff, and they're having a good time, and you back home and you're like, dang, I'm hurting. This is terrible. And I understand those votes don't mean nothing. You just can't come to that conclusion, particularly for Black Americans, because the only thing you have to have to level the playing field is in legislation and in policy. And I say this all the time. I love the fact that you get out there and demonstrate, but demonstration without legislation leads to frustration. And so you got to make sure you understand how policy works.
Well, the only thing, you mentioned this earlier, and this is something I agree with 100%. It's all about economics. Reparations is the only thing that will set us right. Let's just call it what it is. Anything more than anything less than reparations, and you just kicking the can. And I tell you this, Rev, if you want to see the biggest voter registration you ever seen, you would know what to do with. Let those politicians, let Joe Biden come up here tomorrow and say, you know what, I'm committing to reparations. And all Nancy Pelosi and all of them commit to reparations. I guarantee you, if that's to become the new mantra in the Democrat Party, you wouldn't know what to do about registration. Your hands would be hurting. They're that serious about reparations.
That'd be fantastic. No, and listen, I am for reparations, and I know what you're saying. Let me say this. I think that as someone who's been around many who have had this conversation, and I think back to Conyers, the reparations bill, and where that went and didn't go in Congress. I think that, again, just about building power, I think that those who are very much strongly pushing for reparations, we need to figure out how to get organized to make that case. I also work a lot with the folks who are in the climate space as well. I'm going through Hurricane Katrina, so it's just there, and it's different and I'm not used. When I first got into, I didn't know a lot of in other words, a lot of the traditional environmentalists don't come from my background and don't even look like me, to be honest. But what I realize is that they keep beating the drum. And so I think that, and now, there is one thing, the reality of reparation is based upon a number of factors that I pray that we get over the fact that white supremacy and institutionalized racism that can get us to the point where people can really have that conversation and can give that. But I think we having the darndest time just taking down flags right now. Like we can't even get in monuments or things like that. So I would look my hand to be hurting.
If they give us reparations, they can keep their Confederate flags, they can keep their monuments. I don't care. Just give us our reparations. That's how I look at it.
That's what I'm saying. But the thing that uphold those things are the exact things that also prohibit them.
Basically what you're saying is white supremacy is the problem, and white supremacy permeates every political party. That's basically what you're saying.
No, without a doubt, 100%.
Yeah. So the fight is white supremacy, correct?
Yeah, and I mean to get into reparations for sure. I mean the fight is definitely white supremacy. I think those people who are white would say the problem is white supremacy. That's not good for anybody. When you think you're better than somebody. But I think that what we're saying is that to get to the point where we can have an honest conversation to the healing mechanism and restorative justice process of reparations, I'm with you. Like I think that's something that
Rev, I promise you, reparations, it'll heal me. We won't have a conversation, just like they did the CARES Act, and they just did $2 trillion with no study. All of a sudden, they did $2 trillion, and all of a sudden, when it comes to reparations, we need a study. When it comes to the CARES Act, $2 trillion, and they're writing checks and putting checks in everybody's bank account. So it let me know that they can do reparations if they want to. That's what the CARES Act means.
But then you're right. But then on the next level, when it became political, it's still people are now losing as we speak. People who had that $600 a week, for unemployment. They're now losing that. So I'm with you. I understand that. Yes. In other words, to your point, the money is definitely there. And but the will is not there. And I think that's what I'm trying to say. The thing about policy and politics is about creating the political will to create the change. And that's what I'm saying.
So in order to get, wills can be bent by pressure. That's what I do understand about politics too. Politicians don't like pressure. Like right now, what you have going on in the streets, there's a lot of pressure being put on politicians to try to fix what's going on in the streets right now and end that. All of them being put underneath like the vice grip of those protests and all that right now, right? So
you're right. I mean, that's a great example of people utilizing nonviolence demonstration to put that vice or demonstration to put that vice. I think it's not, and so to the point that when you said reparations, then or anything we want. This is a good point. Reparations is we mentioned one thing. Reparations, and I'm not stopping reparations. I mean, yes, I'm with you. Reparations would be fantastic. I want that, but I also want everything else. I'm not going to stop there. It's just that.
Well,
but
I agree. There's other things too. I do agree with you. I got a laundry list of things we need in Black America, not just reparations, right? I'm with you. But that's just one key thing that I know that would really set off a good precedent for us. But Rev, definitely let people know how can they get in contact with you? Because maybe they got some voter registration questions. Maybe they want to ask about why they can't register to vote in certain areas, and maybe you can help out with some of that. So how people can get in contact with you?
Well, first, thank you for the dialogue. I think it's very important for us as Black people to be very honest about this system. And thank you for not just saying to vote, just to vote. It is much more complicated than that. So I appreciate you for engaging that conversation. And for us, we want that as well. We want to engage in that conversation. So Respect My Vote is our campaign. You can go to respectmyvote.com and check it out there. We obviously are working to get a lot of young people engaged in the process. So we use a lot of different voices and influencers to do that. But we would love to continue this dialogue. I mentioned this earlier, what was not done and having these conversations in the 80s and 90s is exactly the reason why we are in the position we are now. And so what we do now in 2020 will have an impact on what our children are discussing in 2030. And so that's why this conversation is such an important conversation now, to really get the policies, why you can't stay home, why you can't get discouraged, because literally what you do now will have the impact for the next generation.
Yeah, and definitely, Rev, I appreciate you for sure coming to the show and engage in that conversation, because some people don't want to come over here and engage that conversation. They like to go to the platform they feel they can be safe on and will toe the line. But us, we just telling you what the people are telling us out there on the streets, Rev. And we had that conversation. We can all work to a better, hopefully a better place, right?
No, most definitely. That's exactly.
So, ladies and gentlemen, make sure if you got any questions, contact Rev. We'll leave his contact information. So, Rev, thank you for having this conversation with us, brother. I greatly appreciate your time.
No, be safe now.